Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be doing another Deep Rock Galactic tier list. This time we're going to be going over all of Zhukovs Overclocks from Season 3. Some of these don't have quite the right symbols on them because this is an older tier list, but that's okay. I'll explain if they've changed. And Scout has probably got the most changes from this recent season in Season 3, with a massive overhaul to the GK2 getting buffs, and massive overhauls to their Overclocks getting buffs. So this should be rather interesting. First up, we do have the GK2, and we have all of their overclocks set up here. Currently, the GK2 has 7 overclocks, which is more than most weapons. There are 3 clean, 3 balanced, and 3 unstable. Our first one is gas rerouting. Gas rerouting increases your rate of fire by 1 and increases your reload speed by 0.3 seconds. That is really good. This essentially gives you 2 tier 1s for 1 overclock, and you can still take either of those tier 1s and still have bonuses on top of them, which is amazing. Since the GK2 has gotten buffed and its mods have gotten reworked, this one in particular has gotten quite a bit better. If you just really like the base GK2, but you want a little something more added onto it, or if you're a really big fan of all of the tier 1 options and you just want to take all of them, you can now with this. So yeah, gas rerouting is really, really good on the GK2 right now, and I would say it's a solid A tier of an overclock. It is very good. Our second overclock here is compact ammo. Compact ammo gives you 5 more magazine size and gives you 30% recoil reduction. With how the GK2 is set up right now, you already have a larger magazine than you used to, so now you can take it even larger. So you would go from 30 to 35 or from 40 to 45, and having a 45 round GK2 feels really good. The extra recoil reduction is nice. GK2 doesn't have very much recoil, at least in my opinion, compared to other weapons, but having reduced recoil is pretty nice. You can also stack extra recoil reduction on this if you'd want. I think that's a little bit overkill, but if you're just it's overkill unless you don't have AI stability engine and you want to maybe simulate AI stability engine by throwing on compact ammo and then throwing on the recoil reduction. This one is pretty good too. I'd say this one is a solid high B tier. Very nice overclock, maybe low A tier. It's about on the same tier as gas rerouting. Both are really solid overclocks. Up next we have homebrew powder. This one randomizes your damage. So you randomize your damage between 80% and 140%. That's with every single shot. This doesn't really help the GK2 that much. It can actually even potentially hurt the GK2 if you're not taking damage as your tier 2 option. It did get buffed though. Previously, homebrew powder, you needed both the tier 2 and the tier 3 damage overclocks on it so that you didn't accidentally low roll towards swarmers. It was kind of a rare occurrence for that to happen, at least if you were running one of the damage mods, but it could happen. It can still happen now, but at least now all your damage is in just one mod. So you can just take the tier 2 for damage, not worry about that. This doesn't really help kill most other things any quicker. It will kill big things a little bit faster, and if you're taking this on Dreadnought missions, it's perfectly fine too. It did get buffed. It's still not one of my favorite overclocks just because the randomized damage I don't think helps you that much compared to the other 2 clean overclocks, but it's still decent. I'd put it high C tier, low B tier. Probably not as high up as these 2. I think these 2 are just generally better options, but it's not a terrible option if you want to take that. Then we move on to our balanced overclocks, and first up we got Bullets of Mercy. Bullets of Mercy did get changed. This used to give you 33% more damage towards enemies that were affected by a status effect. This didn't include all status effects because it didn't include corrosion and it didn't include neurotoxin. It might not have included one other status effect, I don't recall. Now it should include all status effects, but it is now 50% more damage to anything that's affected by those statuses at the cost of 40% of your total magazine size. Now if you take the larger magazine, with Bullets of Mercy, you get 24 rounds, which should be enough. You do a lot of damage with this one, and it's very unlikely that there's not going to be some sort of status effect in play basically all the time, whether you're playing solo or playing on a team, because US Scout can inflict all the status effects that you would like, especially if you're taking a crossbow. That's not entirely necessary though, because if you're in a team setting, or even if you just have Bosco, you can put electric rounds on Bosco, but if you're in a team setting, there's almost always going to be some sort of status effect in play, whether that be fire, ice, electric, stuns, corrosion, neurotoxin, whatever it might be. Bullets of Mercy is almost always going to be just a straight upgrade to the assault rifle, unless you don't like that smaller mag size, which is kind of understandable. Even so, I'm going to put Bullets of Mercy up into S tier. It is fantastic right now. I really enjoy it. Up next, we have Overclocked Firing Mechanism. This one increases your rate of fire by 3, but you get double the recoil. This one's pretty straightforward, but I would consider it an upgrade to the GK2. More rate of fire is better, and like I said, the GK2 doesn't have that much recoil, at least for me. If you find that this makes you have a little bit too much recoil, you can always take the recoil reduction, and then it will go right back down to normal. So if you're okay with that, then it's pretty much just a straight upgrade. And I would put this one high up into A tier. I think it's a really good overclock. Then we move on to our unstables, where we have AI Stability Engine, which also got changed, which is pretty awesome. What AI Stability Engine does is give you no spread and no recoil on your gun. It also gives you 50% more weak spot damage than you already would have. You can stack this on top of the 20% added weak spot damage that the GK2 can pick from. This comes at the downside of -2 of your rate of fire, which is actually not as big a deal as it used to be, since the GK2 got 1 base rate of fire added onto it, and now you can take 2 different rate of fire mods in tier 1 and tier 5. And the other downside is you lose out on 1 damage, which is also not as big of a downside as it used to be. It used to be 2 damage, and the GK2 was hitting at 13 damage then. Now it's hitting at 15. 15 is a really nice breakpoint because that kills swarmers with 1 shot, so you don't need to build damage for this. You absolutely can build damage for this, and that's usually the way I build it, and it completely shreds anything that you can hit the weak spot of. It is really, really good right now. I would put this one also high up into S tier. I think I'd put it above Bullets of Mercy, but both these are good for their own reasons. Really, all 3 of these can compete with one another in terms of damage over time. The Overclocked Firing Mechanism will do the most DPS, because you can have the highest rate of fire. Bullets of Mercy does pretty much the most burst damage because you can have a status effect on there, and it will do the most damage if something's affected by an IFG. And then AI Stability Engine does very consistent damage, especially at very long ranges. So all 3 of these are more damage-oriented overclocks, but they're all different enough that they're all very strong options. And then our last GK2 Overclock is Electrifying Reload, which also got buffed, which is nice. What Electrifying Reload does is once you shoot an enemy, it puts a detonator inside of them. You go to reload, and this triggers the detonator, electrocuting them. This deals pretty good damage, and it lasts for a very long time. 1 shot can kill a grunt on any difficulty, I believe, and that is a lot of value. It's very unlikely that you're only going to shoot a grunt once, though, or just put 1 bullet in a grunt. At least I don't. I usually just spray this across a group of grunts, and then reload it and wait for them all to die from the electricity. This one did get buffed, though, to where every detonator that you have inside of an enemy will trigger and deal extra damage from the first hit. It's not going to stack up the same way the electricity will, because the electricity is its own damage type outside of this. But that does help if you want to kill bigger things a little bit quicker, or if you end up shooting things multiple times, you can get a little bit more value from the electricity on there. This comes at the downside of overall ammo and magazine size, which doesn't really matter too much because you can get more value out of this. And it's a very solid overclock right now. I would say it's A tier, which is surprising because previously this was not one of my favorite overclocks. Before it got changed to where it just loses out on ammo and mag size, I used to lose out on damage and maybe it was total ammo, which was much worse. And the electricity just was not really a great thing. I still probably wouldn't take it over some of these overclocks. I might not even take it over compact ammo, even though I put it a little bit higher than it. But it is a really good overclock, nonetheless. Now that we have that out of the way, let's move on to the M1000 Classic. First up, we got Minimal Eclipse, which Minimal Eclipse did not get changed. This one still gets you a larger mag size, which is great. You can have up to 18 rounds in the gun, which lets you have 9 focus shots, and it also gives you a faster reload speed. Very nice for the M1000. Not really much to complain about here. Really nothing to complain about. It's pretty good. I'd put it up into A tier because the M1000 is already really strong without any sort of overclocks. If you throw this on it, it just makes it feel that much more consistent. So I think it's solid A tier or maybe high B tier. Again, it might be on the same tier as like compact ammo. It's really good. Hoverclock varies depending on who you ask as to how good it can be. What Overclock does is when you use your focus shot, you then can hover, which decelerates you so you can potentially land safely. You can also combine this with something like Special Powder, which is super fun to do, and then have a Flying Scout build. It doesn't change the M1000 whatsoever, so in that regard, it's kind of okay, besides you potentially being able to save yourself from fall damage. I'm going to put it up into B tier. I never know where to put Hoverclock, because sometimes I find it super fun, other times I find it just not necessary a lot of the time, and I just don't use it. Up next we have Active Stability System. This one is pretty good. This one's a balanced overclock that makes it so your focus speed is a little bit quicker. Your reload speed is a little bit slower, which doesn't really matter for the M1000 because you can reload cancel it, and adding that 0.5 seconds, it doesn't really matter. Now, yeah, there's a little bit of an increase with like minimal clips, which I consider a bonus, but mostly I'm looking at it for like the increased mag size. Active Stability System also makes it so you can move at 100% speed when you're using your focus shots. Usually you're only able to move at 30% speed. I would consider this one just a straight upgrade to the M1000. If it's the only thing you got, it's still pretty good. I'd put it up into A tier. Up next we got Hipster, and we're just going to put that one up there. Hipster is still really, really strong. It didn't get changed. What Hipster does is it reduces your damage by 17 damage in total, which sounds pretty bad because the M1000 hits a really nice damage breakpoint at 55 damage, which lets you one-shot grunts on any difficulty, and at least if you're hitting them in the head. Or if you have armor breaking on it and you're using focus shots, you can one-shot grunts to the body on any difficulty. That's also really nice. So nerfing its damage you would think would make it worse. It really doesn't though. Hipster is still super flexible. What Hipster does is give you increased rate of fire, reduced recoil, and a ton of extra ammo. You can make this into a spam fire build and just spam it into enemies and you'll kill them super fast. You can build this as a focus shot build and still be able to one-shot body shot grunts with a focus shot because you hit exactly enough damage to do that for some reason. You can also build it as like a hybrid build, which works really well against kind of anything again. It's surprisingly flexible, and it's a really good overclock overall. So yeah, Hipster is still like S tier, one of the best overclocks in the game. Then we've got Electrifying Focus Shots, which this one did get changed. Electrifying Focus Shots reduces your focus shot damage by 25%, which is not really the best. But now your focus shots do electricity damage. So you'll hit an enemy and then they'll take damage over time afterwards, assuming that they can be zapped by this. It was buffed to give it a longer duration because before I think it had the shortest duration of any of the electric effects at like 4 seconds, and now I think it's up to the standard 6 seconds. I could be wrong about that number, but it is better. It's still not one of my favorite overclocks to be throwing on the M1000, but I don't think it's a terrible overclock. It has kind of niche use because the electric shots the electricity only procs on focus shots. So you have to use focus shots to do that, which is usually your high source of damage, but it reduces that. You can still use them for like blowing through multiple enemies with blow through rounds and kill them that way if you'd like. You could also not take the armor breaking because you don't need it anymore for the electrifying focus shots to kill with a focus shot. They'll just deal damage over time and kill them. So you could take one of the other tier 2 options, which can be pretty nice. I don't know. I think it's an okay overclock, but it's not one that I use super frequently. So, B tier, like low B tier, high C tier, somewhere around there. And then we have Super Cooling Chamber, which Super Cooling Chamber also got buffed, which is awesome because before it was not a great overclock. It was super niche, and it's still kind of niche, but it's less niche than it was. So Super Cooling Chamber gives you more focus shot damage, which was buffed, I believe. I don't think it did as much as it does now. You lose out on mobility when you're using those focus shots, your maximum ammo is cut down, and you also lose out on focus speed, as well as you cut down on your magazine size. The other buff that they gave it was that it gets even more weak spot damage, so hitting weak spots is even more rewarded with this. And the ammo and the maximum ammo reduction is not as harsh as it used to be. That is really, really nice. That definitely helps because that was one of the main deterrents of taking Super Cooling Chamber. Nobody wanted your ammo to be cut down to such a minuscule amount. It still kind of hinders you in some ways, but it's less niche than it was. And you can take this now on more normal missions and still have a pretty strong weapon, especially if you want to take out like Praetorians, Oppressors, anything big. This thing will take them down very, very quick. Even more so if you really like running the IFG grenades, or you can take it now with the new boomerangs and keep something stunned for a while you get in position to hit them with this. It's really nice. Again, still kind of niche. I'm going to put this to the high end of B tier. Moving on to the Drak, we have our Thermal Liquid Coolant, which Thermal Liquid Coolant, it didn't get changed. It's just faster cooling and less heat per shot. Two really nice things for the Drak. Solid, high B tier, low A tier. Nice, lets you have more sustained fire, pretty awesome. Aggressive venting is here, and even though it says it's a balanced tier, it's actually a clean. So these two got switched, actually. That happened a while ago, but yeah, these two have been switched. So aggressive venting, a clean overclock now, that once you overheat with the Drak, it deals fire damage to everything around it, fears everything around it, at least that can be feared, and your overheat duration is less. All of that's really good with aggressive venting, and this one is really strong. Like high A tier, maybe a low S tier. Aggressive venting is great. It's super fun to use too, especially if you like running the IFGs. You can throw one down at your feet, just keep running in and out as you're firing this, and just keep manually overheating it, burn everything and fear everything around you, but it can't really get away because everything's getting slowed by the IFG and it's taking extra damage from the IFG. Just really, really strong. It's also really ammo efficient too, because of how much fire damage you're going to be dealing to everything. We have impact deflection, which is now an unstable. It used to be a clean with no downsides. This gives you bouncy rounds, which is pretty cool when you take it with plasma splash, because then your round can hit, splash damage, bounce, hit again, and then splash damage over there. The downside of this is that you lose out on 2 rate of fire, which is not a huge deal. It still shoots plenty fast, and this is probably your best swarmer control weapon, besides maybe aggressive venting. For Scout, it just clears up swarms of those little guys, no problem. It clears up swarms of basically anything, at least ground units. It's less useful against like flying things like MacTerra. It's still not bad on those missions though either. And I'd put this one high up into A tier along with aggressive venting. Hard to say if I'd maybe put this one into low S tier. On Swarmageddon, absolutely, both these are probably like S tier. But on regular missions, very high A tier. And then we've got Rewire Mod. Rewire Mod is an interesting overclock that has a longer overheat duration than what you usually do, as well as you have less ammo overall. But when you do overheat, it refunds your ammo. It actually refunds a lot of your ammo with this. So just constantly overheating your gun will get you an incredible amount of bullets. I don't remember the exact amount of bullets that you get from it, but it's like for every time that you completely empty out the gun and overheat it, I think you were expending something like 13 to 14 shots or something like that. That gets you a lot of value when you have like 500 something bullets in the gun. So really good for that. It's not great on certain mission types though. It's not great on any place where you need to hold the objective, because if you're constantly overheating your gun, you can get overwhelmed very easily. That's usually not an issue with Scout because you can just grapple hook away. But on like escort missions where you have to protect Dottie, or on salvage missions where you have to defend an area, or on black box missions where you also have to defend an area, you really don't want your gun overheating constantly. And this one is a little bit overkill with the amount of ammo that you get from it. You usually don't need that much ammo on most missions. Now, of course, there are going to be some missions that just go on forever, and you would really like to have this where you're just never running out of bullets. Those missions aren't super common. So I think I'm going to put Rewire Mod up into B tier. Can be really good on certain mission types, definitely struggles on other mission types. So then we go on to the unstables, where we've got thermal exhaust feedback. Thermal exhaust feedback gets more heat per shot than normal, as well as you get more overheat duration than normal if you do overheat your gun. But once your bar starts hitting the red, it can then build up heat onto enemies and light them on fire, which is great. The more red you have, the more heat that will be transferred to the enemy. This is actually a pretty good overclock. It's pretty solid overall. I'd probably put this one up into A tier. It does take time getting used to because the overheat duration is kind of wonky, but once you do get used to it, you can consistently overheat regular enemies with it pretty quick, and it usually just gives you more bonus damage than anything. Then we have Overtuned Particle Accelerator. Overtuned Particle Accelerator increases your direct damage by a lot. It increases it by 8 damage, but it reduces your overall ammo. It increases your heat per shot by a lot, and it also increases your base spread by a ton. You are not very accurate, and this is going to be only for close and maybe medium range. That being said though, if you can consistently fight at close to medium range, it will absolutely shred through everything. It deals really high damage. You can take this for killing big things like Praetorians, Oppressors. You can also use it just for clearing up crowds, because if you take Plasma Splash with this, it can also clear up crowds really quick. Very solid overclock. I would put this one up into A tier as well. Then we have Shield Battery Booster as our last overclock. This one increases your damage and increases your projectile speed when your shields are completely maxed out. They have to be full in order to get this. However, the other two pluses to this work regardless. of what your shield is at. You get increased rate of fire by 1, and you also get an extra 100 rounds for your gun. Other downsides to this weapon is that it cools slower, it overheats faster, your overheat duration is doubled, and if you do overheat this, it breaks your shields. Now you can kind of take advantage of this, where if you manually overheat this, it'll break your shield and your shield will immediately start regenerating. So if you were almost already at a broken shield and you just flip that off, it's actually just faster. It'll just build up your shield quicker. Shield battery booster also has some limitations because on higher difficulties, I don't really like taking shield battery booster. It's just so easy for me to take chip damage from so many sources, falling off of stuff, just getting hit by random attacks that aren't even aimed at me, getting shot by teammates accidentally, and even if it's not that much damage, it doesn't matter. As long as I lose any part of my shield, I don't get the damage increase and the projectile speed increase. So that's kind of a downside to it. It can be situationally good though if you are playing extremely safe, and if you have a team that has maybe a couple shield links or something where you can get your shield back quicker, then it's okay. It can work pretty well on them. It doesn't work on like shield disruption, and it doesn't really work in certain biomes. Any biome where you're just taking passive damage fairly often, it's not going to be good in. So magma core it's not that great. Fungus bog, it's not that great. It depends how many mushrooms you get there, I guess, but magma core, you're probably always going to be burnt a little bit. And like hollow bow, you're probably going to be taking passive damage there from the thorns. So it depends. I'm going to put this on the high end of C tier, low end of B tier. For me, it's just not an overclock that I really enjoy that much. One suggestion for changing this, which I think is kind of a cool idea, is make it so no matter what shield you're at, you get some bonus from it. Now, you would have to take the massive amount of bonus that it gives you and cut it significantly down if you take any chip damage, but still give you some little bit of bonus to it, because otherwise if it's just incremental, it's going to be way too strong. Moving from the primaries to the secondaries, we first up have the jury-rigged Boomstick, which has 4 cleans, 1 unstable, and 1 balanced for whatever reason. First up, we have Special Powder. Special Powder is awesome. This one is going to go right up into S tier for me. It is super fun. It also can be really useful. It really depends on the cave layout, though. If you get a bad cave layout where you can't use it that often, it's pretty meh. But if you get a big open cave layout, it's really good. Special Powder doesn't give you any bonuses to your weapon, besides the fact that now you can shotgun jump with it. So if you jump up in the air and fire the shotgun, you'll be flung in the opposite direction of whichever way you shot it. Super fun, super cool, and you can build it however you'd like. Then we've got Double Barrel, which I've always ragged on Double Barrel, and I'll continue to rag on Double Barrel until it gets changed. Double Barrel is D tier. It is probably one of the weakest, if not the weakest overclock in the game right now. What Double Barrel does is give you 1 more point of damage, but now every time you shoot, you are forced to fire out both barrels of your shotgun. This is not voluntary, you have to do it, and they don't even fire out at the same time. They fire out one after the other, which is a little bit weird. There's not really an upside to this. It's okay against big enemies, which we were already going to be firing both barrels at them anyway, but against any small enemies, you're likely just going to be wasting more ammo that way. So just not that great, and I wish it would get changed. Make it so that it keeps firing out both barrels, make it unstable, give it slugs, give it armor breaking, give it something crazy. Then I'll probably like Double Barrel, but right now it's just not very good. Then we've got Stuffed Shells, which is just completely superior to Double Barrel in every way. This also gives you 1 point of damage, but it gives you 1 more pellet, which is far better, and A tier. Very good for the Double Barrel. It gets you more damage, makes your damage a little bit more consistent, kills big things a little bit quicker, kills little things a little bit quicker, so cool. Compact Shells. This gets you 6 extra ammo and gives you a faster reload speed. Really nice for the Double Barrel as well. Probably B tier. You can now have 50 shells extra, I believe, with the Double Barrel, if you want to take this in your ammo options. That's pretty nice. Double Barrel is good for clearing up small things. It's pretty good for stunning big things, and it's good for dealing chunk damage to big things too. Shaped Shells is up next, and Shaped Shells did get buffed. I don't remember if it got buffed since the last time I talked about it in the tier list setup like this, though. This one reduces your spread by 50%, so you have a tighter cone, which is great. You can pick off things at longer range, and you can hit weak spots a little bit easier. And it previously made you lose 1 pellet. Now it makes you lose 4 ammo total, which is less of an issue, and it's pretty good. I would put this one up into A tier. It's great for picking off weak spots on enemies. It's really good for just blowing apart Magterra Trijaws and stuff, because it's very consistent for just killing them. If you really hate Trijaws, this could be an option for you. It's also really good for taking out like acid spitters and web spitters at basically any range. And then we've got Jumbo Shells, which Jumbo Shells gives you a massive amount more damage, 8 more damage per pellet, but you lose out on 10 ammo and your reload speed is slightly lower. Reload speed is kind of whatever. Ammo does kind of suck, but if you're taking this, you're just taking it to deal massive damage to something at very close range, which it's really good at doing that. So I would put this one also up into A tier. It's pretty solid. Double Barrel doesn't really have any bad overclocks besides Double Barrel, which just isn't that good overall and should probably be changed. The rest, though, are very solid. Zhukovs have 5 overclocks, which is also a little bit strange. I don't know why they only have 5. Well, actually, I do know why they only have 5 because one of them was taken out. But at least that makes a little bit more sense than the double barrel. But they do have a weird spread. 3 unstables, 1 balanced, 1 clean. Their clean is called minimal magazines. This increases your rate of fire and faster reload speed. That's really good. You can actually have like a 0.9 second, or maybe it's a 1.1 second reload speed with them. It's super fast and solid. If you like that, if you like the Zhukovs as they are, this one's going to feel like just a straight upgrade to it, so B tier. Then we've got custom casings, which this one reduces your rate of fire, which isn't a huge deal because the Zhukovs shoot really fast, so reducing it by a little bit doesn't really matter. But then it increases your magazine size, so you get a whole lot more bullets. This is better for like sustained fire, which doesn't necessarily buff the Zhukovs in my opinion, it just kind of changes the way that you would use them. Zhukovs reload pretty quick regardless, so you don't really need the large mag size, but it is, I guess, a bonus, so B tier. Then we move on to the unstable overclocks, where we have Cryo Mindlets. And Cryo Mindlets is really good. Cryo Mindlets reduces your damage and reduces your clip size, which you usually don't care about with the Zhukovs with these, because now you have Cryo Mindlets. Whenever your bullets hit the ground, they will then become ice mines. These ice mines arm, and when enemies walk across them, they explode, and they add cold to anything. They can freeze things, which is great. It's really good for crowd control, and you can also combine these with the blow-through rounds for your Zhukovs in tier 4, I want to say. That way you can shoot through an enemy, put the mine underneath them, and have this explode, potentially freezing them. This is super useful for crowd control, less useful for other things that you would want freeze for. It's not great against flying enemies because they need to be near a wall in order for you to get some sort of advantage with this. They're not great for freezing big things like detonators. It just takes way too many bullets to do this. Yes, if you combine it with like a cryo cannon, it will work, but the cryo cannon can do it by itself. So at that point, the cryo mindlets are a little bit redundant. But still, for crowd control, they are fantastic, and I would put them up into the low end of S tier. They are really good. Maybe the high end of A tier. They're somewhere in there. They're pretty good, though. Then we have embedded detonators, which is another S tier overclock. So when you shoot an enemy, it'll stick a detonator inside of them, and then once you go to reload, it will explode that detonator. The detonator deals 38 explosion damage. This comes at the cost of your regular damage for your Zhukovs, which doesn't really matter because the explosives are definitely making up for that. Cuts down on your mag size, which also doesn't matter because explosives, and then it cuts down on your maximum ammo. That one hurts the most, but if you build it all for ammo, you still have a good amount of ammo overall, and this lets you deal really high burst damage to basically anything. The only time you don't want to be using this is when you're fighting like a dreadnought that has their armor up. If you see that they have their armor up, then don't shoot them with this. Once their armor breaks though, then shoot them with this and you'll deal really high damage to them. Then we have gas recycling, which gas recycling also got buffed. And I was already a fan of gas recycling before it got buffed, but with this new buff, it's even better than it was previously. So what gas recycling does is increase your damage. This gives you 6 more damage total, which is a pretty big buff to the Zhukovs. You now have no weak spot damage though, whatsoever. Doesn't matter what you're hitting. That's kind of rough. You also can't move as fast when shooting these, which isn't a huge deal because you can shoot out the Zhukovs pretty fast, and they also have their tier 5 that lets you have extra movement speed if you want to take that. So that one's kind of whatever. And it also increases your base spread, so you're going to want to take the tier 3 that reduces your base spread so that you can hit enemies at kind of medium range. But they also gave it now armor breaking, which is really awesome. So it basically deals true damage to almost anything that you're going to be hitting with this. Assuming you're not just like hitting an oppressor in the face or something, then, you know, go around and shoot him in the back. Anything else, though, you're going to be dealing about the same amount of damage regardless, and if you want to take those like blow-through rounds, it's really good for crowd control. It helps you clear up things really quick, and you don't really have to care about where you're hitting enemies. You just spray it into a crowd, and you'll start clearing them up. I really like this one. I'm going to put it high A tier. I think it's really good. And this is all the overclocks that I have on this list because I just checked, and this one does not have the crossbow on it. Alright, I found a new list. and just quickly put all the other ones where we had them. So let's talk about the crossbow. First up, we have Quickfire, which Quickfire increases the reload speed of the crossbow, which is pretty nice, and it also increases the velocity by double. This is actually pretty good for the crossbow. It lets you have a more long-range crossbow than you otherwise would, so you can pick off things from quite a ways away. That's not always necessary depending on the cave layout. If you're in, an enclosed cave the whole time, who cares? I'd put it up into B tier, maybe into A tier. I think it's a pretty solid overclock overall. The Specialist is a really good overclock for the crossbow. This gets you more special ammo, and it also increases the special ammo's duration. This works with any of the special ammo, so you can have more pheromone bolts, more electric bolts, or more explosive chemical bolts. All of those are really good, and they can also be tailored to whatever type of mission you're going on, which oddly enough makes the Specialist more of a generalist, at least depending on how you look at it. But really solid overclock, probably high A tier, maybe low S tier. It's really good. Then we've got the cryo bolts and the fire bolts, and I'm gonna kind of lump these both in together because they're basically the same. It's just one deals fire damage, the other one freezes stuff. Both of those are good. Both of those are great for crowds, especially if you put pheromone bolts on it too. You stick something with a pheromone bolt and you shoot 1 to 2 fire bolts, 1 to 2 cryo bolts on them, and then just bugs swarm around them, light on fire or freeze. Very useful. Firebolts used to be a little bit better when Nemesis was more common in Season 2 and you were going on more robot missions because you could help build up fire. The firebolts themselves weren't way great for actually lighting turrets and stuff like that on fire. You kind of had better options like just taking jumbo shells or stuffed shells or something and taking white phosphorus rounds with it. Now that we're out of that, we're on to more of the rock pox, which can be affected by both of these. I would say they're both pretty equal and both pretty good overall. I'd put both of these up into A tier. Then we get to the unstable overclocks, where first up we have Bodkin Points, and Bodkin Points is super fun. It's one of my favorite overclocks in the entire game. This one makes it so your bolts will bounce into 2 other enemies once you hit one of them. You get a nerf to your damage though, and a nerf to your reload speed. Neither one of those really matter because you can just build damage on this, and then you can still one-shot body shot grunts on any difficulty, and they can bounce up to 3 of them. So you can clear up 3 grunts with it, which is pretty nice. And even against big enemies, with the crossbow's really high chance of stunning things, stunning just 3 enemies is also super nice. And Bodkin Points, I'm going to put it up into A tier. It's either very high A tier or low S tier for me. You know what, just for the fun factor, I'm going to put it into S tier. And then we have Trifork Volley as our last overclock, which Trifork Volley gives you 3 bolts every time you shoot, even if you don't technically have 3 bolts on the crossbow, which is a little bit weird, but you can sometimes get into a situation where you just have 2 bolts loaded on the crossbow and it will still count as 3 projectiles. You also get more ammo overall, which is nice. Downsides to this are that you can no longer retrieve your bolts at all, which does kind of suck. Your bolts do less damage per bolt, so you're dealing a little bit less damage overall, but a lot more damage per shot, and your reload speed is much slower. The best way to use this, in my opinion, is probably to take electric bolts, take the taser bolts, stick 2 of these on a target so it can't move very quick, and then make sure that you have the magnetic shafts on the Trifork Volley, so all of your bolts go right to that enemy, and they deal extra damage, so you make up for your lack of damage, and you will deal really high burst damage. It's very similar to having something like jumbo shells or even embedded detonators, and I'd probably put this one up into A tier. You can run through bolts with this pretty quick, and it's reasonably okay against crowds. Sometimes it's not the best against crowds, especially if they're more spaced out, where you can potentially just miss your bolts, or all 3 bolts hit the same thing, and 1 bolt would have killed it. So it does have some limitations there, but if you just want to take it for taking care of big things, take this, take electric bolts, take magnetic shafts, and go to town on them. You'll do a lot of damage. This is where I put all of Scout's overclocks right now. Scout is in a really good place at the moment, I would say. After all of the updates, they have 3 very solid primary weapons, they have 3 very solid secondary weapons, and they have a myriad of overclocks that benefit all of them. There's only a handful, really, like these 3, which, one of them I don't even really have that much of a problem with. Actually, 2 of these I don't really have much of a problem with. They're still objectively a bonus most of the time. So tell me your thoughts on Scout and Scout's overclocks down in the comments below. We will be going through the other classes with this too, but I did want to do Scout first because they got the most amount of changes and they just had like the most overhauls to their class overall, mostly because the GK2 got completely overhauled. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye!